Welcome back to the show, everybody. I'm your host, Dr. David Hooper, and this is the 12th episode of the Unstoppable Introvert Project. And it's one of the most challenging things to do. Today, it's all about conflict resolution. And this one is where you be the bigger person and make the right choice and really understand how to resolve those conflicts and just live a really happy life. But how's your week going? I have been in the gym this week, been fairly consistent in the gym in 2024, kind of 6 or 7 weeks of weight training, of fairly regular running, and my legs are sore. I am sore this morning, but it's all good. It's all good. It means we're growing. It means we're committing to our goal of being in the best shape of our lives in 2024. And we've been running as well. Laura's been working towards her marathon. The marathon is, I think, 5 weeks away. 5 weeks tomorrow. So we're getting close to that as well. And I'm not doing as much running as I would like by myself. That's because I'm obviously training with Laura a lot. But in general, I'm doing pretty well. Diet is pretty good. It's about 80% out of 100, or 8 out of 10 maybe. It's a better way to do it. And yeah, life is good. Life is good. The podcast's rolling on. We're getting after it in our personal lives. Laura's getting after her accountancy exams, training for the marathon. The Hoopers are busy. The Hoopers are busy. And the reason I'm talking about Laura so much in this episode is because we're talking about conflict today. And you know it. When you're in a relationship, there is sometimes conflict, and you have to learn to deal with that conflict. And Laura and I have been married for coming up to 8 years. We've been together for 11, coming up to 11, 10 or 11. I'll edit that so it sounds right. And yeah, learning how to deal with conflict is definitely part of marriage, and it's part of your lives as well. Personal lives, dealing with family, networking, if you're running a business, working with other people, having clients. There's a lot of conflict in your life, and it's how you deal with that conflict which will kind of define you. There's always going to be conflict. Not everybody is going to be as balanced as you are going to be if you're not yet, but it's definitely an important life lesson. And you know, I've got people in my life who cannot deal with conflict. They are aggressive, they are not emotionally intelligent, they are looking for opportunities to create conflict, which for me is absolutely madness. But you can only control what you can control. So it's all about you today, working on yourselves, working on your ability to stay calm and make logical decisions. So we're going to have a good chat about that today as well. Now, I don't know if you can tell if you're watching this on YouTube. If you're not, head over to @Dr. David Hooper after this episode. Make sure you subscribe on TikTok as well, Instagram and LinkedIn, as well as YouTube. Also, if you're on YouTube, quickly head over to Spotify and follow us on there, the Unstoppable Introvert Project podcast. And yeah, I don't know if you've noticed, but on the video you can see that I am a redhead. And we redheads have a fiery side, I think is the most diplomatic way to say it. And something that I've always struggled with is being really aggressive with, certainly in sport. So I never was like a fighter at school or even after school. I wasn't bothered about fighting people, but I was extremely competitive, still am. And you know, during football matches, I'd be starting fights on the pitch, I'd be swearing at people, I'd create conflict because of my competitiveness. And that would sometimes get me in trouble. I'd get booked and sent off and all these things because I'd let my mouth run. And I had to really get a handle of that when I grew up. I also didn't want to get my head kicked in when, you know, I got a little bit older. So I had to be able to understand the difference between my reactive nature and my logical nature, or the reactive side of your brain and the logical side of your brain. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit today. Now, the first thing about conflict is you need to really establish the desired outcome and the benefits of that resolution. So when you're in a conflict, what is it that you actually want to happen? And a lot of the times, if you ask yourself that question, the answer is, I kind of just want the other person to concede and say that I'm right. And that isn't ideal. Do you actually want to resolve the conflict, or do you just want someone to say, you know what, you're right? That's the first thing to really think about. Because remember, acceptance isn't passive recognition. I give in, you're right. That's not a win for you. So acceptance is not passive recognition. Like when the other person says, you know what, I'm sick of this argument, I give in, you win. Just to be clear, you do not win. That is not the situation you want to find yourself in, because that person's probably very resentful. They're going to try and limit their time with you, or at least I certainly would, if you are so locked in on your thoughts that you aren't willing to give an inch. Obviously, depending on the situation, why would you have the energy to argue with that person? I certainly wouldn't. Another example is the acceptance of it is what it is. That situation, well, it is what it is, let's move on. That's another situation you might kind of find yourself in, where you almost agree to disagree. It is what it is, and let's kind of both move on with our lives. And you kind of have to just focus on the reality of the situation. Have you got yourself in a situation where you and whoever you're talking to are at each other but completely disagree on the outcome, and you just have to kind of go, you may not like what I'm saying, I don't like what you're saying, it is what it is, let's move on. And that's a mature way to go about it. It's pointless butting heads and keeping going at each other, because nobody wins. So it's all about awareness. It's all about saying, right, what am I actually trying to do here? If you ever say, I'm trying to win an argument, that is a mindset shift you need to change. Arguments are not there to be won and lost. They are there to be resolved in a way that benefits both parties. So if you're in a relationship, let's say you're married, and your wife and you are, just because that's an example from my own life, you and your wife are kind of going at each other, and then you think, right, I think I won that argument. Just know that you've damaged that relationship. An argument isn't there to be won and lost. It's there to be resolved in a positive way for both people. So if you're, again, thinking, I just want to be right, that is a really toxic place to be, and it's something that you can start to work on, which is what this podcast is all about. So, logical response and reactive response. And this is something my wife and I have worked on really hard over the past couple of years, and that is avoiding reacting to each other. So, reactive versus logical responses. There's basically two types of responses. You can react to the situation, or you can quickly think this through and have a measured response. I'll give you an example. Let's say that your wife came home from work and had a go at you, and you reacted and were really angry back at her, and you ended up having a huge fight. She stormed upstairs, you stormed downstairs, you didn't speak to each other for a few days, and it was a really horrible situation. Now, in that scenario, there's two choices. So let's rewind. Let's say your wife came home from work on edge, stressed, anxious, angry. And then she came in, saw maybe you hadn't done the dishes or something. She'd left you a few tasks to do, you hadn't done them, and she's pissed, and she had a go at you about it. Now, you've got two choices here. Firstly, to react to her aggression, or secondly, to think logically about the situation that she's been put in. If you react to that situation, you're probably going to go back at her aggressively. You're going to say all the other things that you have done. You're going to take it personal that she's attacked you and that she isn't thinking about you, and that now you're pissed off at her. And that's a very selfish way of looking at that situation. And it's a one that we want to start to move away from. And we want to start to move to a logical response. And now what a logical response in that situation would be, my wife's came home stressed, anxious, angry. I haven't done the dishes. I said I was going to. I've let her down a little bit there. And she's had a go at me. And I probably deserved it. But let's look past that initial layer. What's actually going on here? Well, my wife's stressed and angry and upset. Has something happened at work? Is my wife looking for attention, and she's just putting out that signal in maybe the wrong way? And instead of me getting reactive and angry back at her, I absorb the thing that I did wrong, which was the dishes, and instead go back and say, I'm so sorry I've done that, but what's happened at work? Why are you acting in this way? And that will be a logical response to that stimulus. And instead of reacting to her behavior in a negative way, I'm trying to react in a positive way to provide an opportunity for her to actually say, you know what, I don't actually give a shit about the dishes. Something really horrible happened at work that I want to be comforted about. And then you can really have a good conversation about that situation. And then maybe do the dishes as well. So in every situation you find yourself when you're having an argument, there is two options presented to you. You can react to the situation, or you can logically think through that situation and try and provide an opportunity to resolve the conflict and to provide a supportive environment for your partner. But also it could be, it's not just in your married life, it could also be at work. Maybe an employee is acting out. I've had this a few times at work where an employee has stopped performing at the level they needed to do. And initially you see their work, you think, oh, that isn't really up to standard. And you might get annoyed. You might think, well, you're really letting me down with your crappy work. That might be your first response. But then you have the logical side and you think, right, this person has been excelling and now they're having a dip. What is the reason that they're having a dip? Is it because something's gone on at home? Is it because they're having financial issues? Is it because they've started to have marital problems? Is it because they are unhappy with part of their job? And when you explore those answers, not only do you become a better boss and you provide area for your employee to tell you what's going on and then you can address it, you create that excellent relationship where that person trusts you. And eventually when they do start to pull themselves back around with your support, they will give you the best work of their life. And that's how you create that family, that tribe, that community. Exactly what we're trying to create at the Unstoppable Introvert Project in your place of work. So that's the first thing. Whenever you're in a place of conflict, can you try and resolve it before it even starts by ignoring your reactive brain and going into the side of logic? What logically might be happening here? What logically can I do to provide this person with a safe space so they can tell me exactly what's going on and I can get to the root of the problem? And that is an incredibly powerful skill to have. So in that situation where you do have something kicking off, ask yourself the question, and it's like that, it's in a split second. What do you actually want to come out of this interaction? Do you want to make up? Do you want to have a better positive relationship? Do you want to have a happier life? And what is really most important here? So in my situation that I just gave, is the dishes not getting done the most important thing in that whole situation? No, it was the thing that was going on at work that needed resolved. I think when you come to try and resolve conflict, it's very easy to put yourself into either kind of a category of being a victim or the category of being a villain. So stop creating these characters for yourself, almost apportioning blame, focusing on things like, oh, this should have happened for me, or it ought to have happened to them, or why did this happen to me? And you've got to start to accept the reality of your current situation. So a lot of the time you get into situations that you were meant to get into or you've put yourself in, and it's all about trying to take the responsibility and the accountability for yourself and stop being a victim. There is not a victim, there is not a villain in this situation or in most situations, so stop being a victim. For 6 months in 2017, I was the biggest victim I've ever met. I'd lost my job, so I was a victim there. Why did I lose my job? Why didn't I get kept on? Why did I have to start from scratch? And then I put on 70 pounds of body fat and was classed as morbidly obese. Why was I the one who had to get fat? Why can't I be the one who's ripped? Why? And then lastly, I got clinically depressed because of all of that. Why am I the one who's got depressed? Why couldn't I be happy? I'm never happy. I'm so unfortunate with my life. Victim, victim, victim. It is up to you to decide to turn that around. You have to seek wins. And bringing that back to this conflict resolution, you can find yourself in 3 different scenarios. The first one is lose-lose. So this is where you're locked in a relationship of endless struggle. And this is where you're just losing conflict. The next one is lose-win. And this is where there's people in relationships where there's this perceptual point scoring. I've got people in my life like this who just are always point scoring, taking the piss out of each other, but it's past the point of humor and banter. It's personal attacks. And my wife and I sometimes just think, how are you together? How is that a fun relationship to be in? And we just think it's incredible. Each to their own, I guess, but in terms of being in a conflict-free relationship, whether that's at work or in personal relationships, a lose-win is just not something you should strive to be in. And if that's someone you're with, I would certainly reflect on that relationship. And the thing you want to aim for is a win-win. So this is a positive strategy and the only position that is sustainable. Like I've said, that point scoring system, eventually someone is going to get tired and that relationship's going to break down unless something changes. Now, what my wife and I always try, we don't get it perfect every time, by the way. I'm not standing here preaching, saying we have the most incredible relationship you'll ever find. No, we don't. But we do try and win together as often as possible, where we get to a place when we're having conflicts, for example, and we talk through our thoughts and feelings and we try to be logical about that. Is it perfect every time? No, it's not. But it's a lot healthier than either losing and just being in a state of loss all the time. You know, I don't like you, you don't like me. And it's certainly a lot healthier than the point scoring. I won that argument, you lost this argument. That's not a good place to be either. So remember, a lot of what's going on happens in our own heads. So you tell yourself the narrative, don't you? You kind of get into that situation where you're talking to yourself going, oh, I can't believe this happened. I can't believe they acted like this. And you build it up and build it up and build it up. My wife and I have this rule that we're not allowed to walk away from each other if we are having an argument. You have to deal with it then and there. So I don't believe in that situation really of space. Maybe, go for a walk and calm down a little bit, but I would prefer to go for a walk together and calm down together. I don't like conflict dragging on. I like to extinguish it before it catches fire. I like to put it out. So I always try and think, right, we're not allowed to walk away from each other. Let's just talk this through calmly and logically and get to a point where we've both won and we're both back being best friends and both having a lovely time and a happy time. And that's exactly the same when it comes to, your relationships at work. Sometimes you have to be brave and really allow yourself to figure out what is it that you want from this conflict. Because sometimes conflict at work is difficult. You're pushed together with a random group of people and you're told to work together. And a lot of the time, our attitudes clash, our personalities clash. You have to work with people you don't particularly like. But it's all about establishing those boundaries in those relationships where you both understand what you want out from this. Well, we want a professional relationship that's productive. Right, that's our boundaries. No need to get into the personal aspects of our lives. We can keep this professional and we can be productive. We can get our work done. And we can get along and be civilized at work. So I wanted to give you 10 essential skills when it comes to managing conflict in relationships. And I'm really interested to hear your thoughts on these. Let me know if you've got a top one, or if you're going to try a few of these at home. Send me a DM at Dr. David Hooper on all of your favorite social media platforms and we can have a conversation. I'd love to hear from you. The first one's managing your state and being clear on your own outcomes. So we talked about managing state in the last episode. If you haven't heard it, head over there and head back to episode 11. And making sure you're in a positive state, a resourceful state as often as possible can really help limit that conflict. So if you're in a peak performance state, you'll have the ability to breathe and to kind of understand, what you actually want to resolve, how to deal with these difficult situations. So that's the first one. Manage your own state, get in that high performing state and really be clear on the exact outcomes you're trying to get from the conflict. Then number 2 is trying to agree on the highest positive intention for both of you. Now you've understood what you want out of it. What is it that we want out of it? What do we as a pair want to really highlight here as our positive intention? Hopefully, it's something like we want to resolve this conflict. Number 3 is try to agree rather than have that conflict. So an example of this might be, I know we disagree on things, but what can we agree on in relation to this specific thing? Where's the middle ground? How can we get to a point where we can move forward? Number 4, keep only to what is relevant to the specific issues rather than generalizing to all areas of conflict. So something that you might have in your relationship, and again, if this is a red flag, so please reflect on your relationship. And I'm not saying to break up with whoever you're married to or whatever, or kick off with people for sure, but if you're in a relationship and that person brings up things that happened months ago or years ago in arguments, red flag, get the hell out of there. We want to be with somebody who focuses on what are you actually talking about? What is the conflict right in front of you? There's no need to generalize. There's no need to bring in other examples from months ago, years ago, because that's all going to add to the conflict. We want to focus on the specifics of what exactly do we want to resolve here. And once you've got that specific nailed down, there's no need to look wider. There is enough going on in this world to bring in extra conflict into your daily life. You do not need it. And then it's about how you manage that discussion. I'll say discussion rather than argument, because it should be a discussion. It should be a positive, productive conversation. Try and manage your state. So when you are in conflict, you probably feel annoyed, irritated, angry, grumpy, quiet, sad, low, depressed, angry again. And if you're able to change your state and put yourself back in a more resourceful state by doing a little bit of exercise, if you find yourself in that situation where you've just turned into this monster and you're not being productive and you're not being a good version of yourself, that is a good time to go for a quick run, or go do a workout together, or you have a dance and a sing. And something that you might want to do if you're in a couple, if you are grumpy at each other, put a song on, sing it, dance it, and after 3 minutes you'll be over the argument. You'll be like, what were we even arguing for? So changing your state is so transformational, and it can really help you resolve your conflict. Number 6, keep it in the here and now. So I know before we were talking about bringing in loads of different issues. Don't defend and attack based on those past experiences and issues. Make sure it is so relevant to the here and now. You're bringing in just examples of this very specific thing. You're not thinking years ago. You're not thinking months ago. You are simply thinking about the here and the now. The dog, I don't know if anybody's watching on YouTube. I'm trying to move out the way to give you a little glimpse, but the dog's actually dreaming behind me. If you're on YouTube, you might be able to see her. Sorry to interrupt that podcast there, guys, but that is absolutely gorgeous. So head over to YouTube if you want to see my doggy having a dream. She is absolutely lush, and it will be well worth your time. Right, my favorite. Now this is one of my favorite things as an introvert, and this comes down to language. And you might not have that much trouble with this, because as introverts we're pretty good at engaging with people, but make sure you're asking someone rather than telling them when you're in these situations. When you are in conflict, you will find that you're getting told a lot. You did this, you did this, you did this, you do this. And what that does is it pisses you off, right? I've been there thinking, you're telling me all the things I've done. What about you? You haven't exactly been acting very well. And you just play this game of tennis back and forward, picking at each other's faults. Instead, only ask questions. So something like, what would have to happen for you to feel a little bit better about this situation? What could I have done differently next time to make sure this doesn't happen again? And when you're asking for that information, the person you're talking to starts to think, oh, okay, maybe this person didn't mean to upset me, and they're actively trying to get better next time. So they're really appeased. So make sure you're asking a lot of questions. You're not telling someone. Number 8, resist the temptation to immediately counter whatever that person said. Instead, discuss it. And that brings us back around to that whole thing of this should be a discussion. When you're having a conflict, it isn't an argument, it is a discussion, a conversation. And you need to analyze what that person's saying. Now, if we go back to the start of this episode, I talked about logical and reactive reactions. So we can react logically or react in a reactive way. To give yourself time to think logically, you need to resist that temptation to immediately provide an example of when that person was wrong, and instead allow them to give their examples, understand them, acknowledge them, and then respond in a logical way. And that is going to save you a lot of heartache as you go through your time together. So don't react to what they've said. Don't give your example of how else they messed up. Maybe they didn't do the laundry, maybe they didn't do the dishes, maybe they didn't do the hoovering, maybe they've had a shit week. You don't need to nail them on every single thing. It's about being in that position where you can think logically and go, okay, I acknowledge what you're saying. Here are my thoughts on it. Now, what do you think? Seek to clarify and don't assume. This is number 9. This is the one where you build on the asking. This is where you resist that temptation to nail them on their statements. Ask what they mean. Ask questions like, can you tell me a bit more about how you're feeling? Can you tell me exactly what I did that made you feel like this? Really clarify situations so you're left with no doubt about how to not create this situation again. And remember, this isn't just you. It is you're in a relationship, it's a pair, so you're both working towards this end goal of being better with each other. And then number 10, try and give one really strong example of your thoughts, of your feelings, of your examples, rather than a list of weak examples that really just are annoying and frustrating to the other person. So let's say somebody was really upsetting to you, but they'd also not, I don't know why I'm stuck on the housework, but that's all my examples today. They haven't done the laundry, they haven't made the bed, they haven't tidied up, they haven't walked the dog, they haven't helped with the food prep, they haven't done X, Y, and Z. But really, those little chores, although they add up, they don't really mean anything. If your example is, well, I was upset after something happened at work and I didn't feel like you emotionally supported me because you didn't ask me any questions after work and you didn't pay any interest in me. That is a fucking tough example. You know, very, very powerful. And that would give your partner some thinking space to go, oh, bloody hell, I didn't ask them how their day was and I wasn't there for them emotionally. Whereas if you say, I'm pissed off because you haven't done your chores, that person will go, I can do the chores anytime. Have you done your chores? You know, and then the back and forward will start. So try and, if you are upset, be balanced and give a good overview of the problem and the issue and the real emotional connection to that. And then last one, I guess, so this is 10 plus 1. Try and play the devil's advocate position and try and see things from their perspective and try and acknowledge their perspective, but also use phrases like, I don't suppose you will agree with me, but I think this. Or, I know it isn't an angle you'd probably consider, but what about this? So try and put yourself in their shoes at times as well. And really just allow whoever you're working with or in a relationship with or having this conflict with an opportunity to acknowledge both your side, but also you're acknowledging their side as well. So when you've got this balanced approach to this conflict resolution, you're presenting lots of opportunities to resolve the problem in a positive way. So quickly guys, those 10, we've got manage your state and be clear on the outcomes. Agree what the intention of this argument is. Do you want to resolve it or are you just picking fights? Try and agree rather than a conflict. Where's the middle ground? Number 4, keep only to what is relevant. Don't go back in time. Try and just stay in the present. What's the real problem? Number 5, manage that state through the argument. You know, try to be positive, to be in a resourceful state. Change your state if you need to. Number 6, don't defend and attack. Don't make it tit for tat. Don't make it like a tennis match. Give yourself time to respond logically. Number 7, ask rather than tell. Take a real interest in understanding that person's viewpoint. Number 8, discuss the problem. Remember, an argument isn't an argument, it is a discussion. Conflict is a discussion. Number 9, seek to clarify. Don't just assume they understand you and you understand them. Try and get all the information you can. Number 10, don't have a ton of weak reasons for the conflict. Try and have one emotionally charged conflict, if you have to have one at all, and bring it to the attention of your partner or your employee or your line manager or whoever in a measured and controlled way. And then lastly, play devil's advocate and try and put yourself in your partner's shoes, see things from every angle and every perspective, and really have that balanced approach to understanding the conflict and, of course, resolving it. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. I hope you've enjoyed episode 12, Understanding Conflict Resolution. Hope you're ready to go and resolve all of the conflict in your life. You're going to live a much happier life. Just ask yourself, don't you want to just be happy all the time? And if the answer is, yeah, I do want to be happy all the time, prioritize getting your head around being logical rather than reactive when it comes to conflict. And you will be in a really good position to go and have a great life, have a great team, have a great relationship. Remember to find us on YouTube at Dr. David Hooper. You can find us on Instagram, TikTok, and LinkedIn on the same handle as well. And of course, find us on Spotify, the Unstoppable Introvert Project podcast. And please share it with whoever you think it might be useful for. I've had loads of messages around it being shared to people's sons and nieces and nephews and uncles and aunties and friends and family, and I am so thankful for you all. You really are making my day with these messages about how much you're loving the podcast, and it's still a daunting thing for me, but we're getting after it. I'm trying to be unstoppable for you guys and hopefully help you guys be unstoppable as well. So I hope you enjoyed the episode, and like I always say, being an introvert isn't the thing that will hold you back. It is the thing that is going to launch you towards your unstoppable, incredible future. Until next week, guys, stay unstoppable.